Council is going to be meeting in a series of committee meetings, starting first with Planning and Development, then Environment, Finance and Personnel, then Transportation, and finally Communications. First, Planning and Development Committee. The chair is 4th Ward Council Member Debbie Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. President. The first thing that I have to share with all of you is that we will not be hearing our report from the Athens Area Chamber of Commerce this evening. Jennifer Simon had another meeting that she had to go to, and so we're going to reschedule that.
Okay.
I told her people probably wouldn't be too upset if I was making the meeting shorter rather than longer.
We'll put her at the end next time.
Make her wait.
And I do have several miscellaneous items. First of all, I believe that people received in their mailboxes in the last couple of weeks a notice from the law director about leases that we need to renew some easements that we have on Ohio University land. I looked over them because it did talk about authorizing payment to renew these leases. These are $1 each. So we need to go ahead and bring that forward. Did people get a chance to look at that?
Almost all of the station project, right?
Yes. Okay, so we'll put that on the agenda next time. And then we have a couple other things that we need to do with the fees. So I will never make the mistake of saying that we're done dealing with something again. So we've been working on implementing the recommendations that were made by Maximus. There are a couple other things. Several of them are fees that exist in the code elsewhere, but because we wanted to have them all in one place also, we're going to bring them in here just to make it consistent. The citations for sanitary violations and solid waste disposal violations, those have been amended in the code, and we'll just be making that consistent in the ordinance that has the list of all the fees. And then there were some recommendations from Steve Pearson that in the previous ordinance, the applications for new construction had an application fee plus a charge per square foot. And without that charge per square foot, the application fee is the same for a shed in your backyard as it would be for an entire shopping center. So the recommendation is that we add 3 cents per square foot of gross floor area. And that just brings it back to where it had been before we made those amendments. And with the alteration permits, Steve is recommending plus $1.50 per $1,000 of improvement, which was in place in the code before. And within that same section about alteration permits, an application fee of $50, because it does take time to review permits that end up being refused as well. So I believe that this is just bringing some of these things back to the status that they had before, some areas that just got overlooked when that overall amendment of the fees was brought through. So, I'm sorry, it's a lot of detail. I was just handed all of this, or I would have copies of it in all of your hands. I can pass this around if people want to look at it. But I think we'd be talking about amending that ordinance starting next week.
Can you make copies for later? And
Yes.
Put it in a mailbox? Okay.
And then the question about rooming houses within the same ordinance. There were some questions about definition and the language that we have to correct that is $90 per housekeeping unit or owner-occupied unit keeping renters, because there was some question if people were just renting a room in their house. And there also was an issue where there's a rental permit fee where there are more than 10 units, but they're in multiple buildings. The intention was that those are multiple buildings on one site, not 10 different houses scattered across the city. So we would add the words "at one location."
Always a way to get through.
Just tightening things up a little bit to make our meeting clear. We okay with bringing these
Yeah.
forward next week?
It means we'll revise and read it again.
Yes.
These ones that got left out of the code for the building permit and the renovation remodeling, were those touched by the Maximus oversight? You said we're back to where they used to be. Is that,
I think that Maximus looked at that flat charge when they did their review and didn't look at that square
didn't even
footage.
notice that there was that
Right.
additional, so we're just following the recommendation of the code officer.
Yes. So, those are all the items that I have. Does anyone else have miscellaneous? Nancy?
I guess that with respect to that question about what's going on, I was concerned about what Jonathan wrote in the Athens News, not about what I said, but I'm concerned about the interpretation of the land development ordinance. It seems to be a little hazy, a little loosey-goosey. I was wondering if anybody has any ideas on how we could tighten that up, send it out, have somebody look it over. I mean, I know it was jesting. I actually had a couple engineers and an architect sitting in my class a few minutes ago. Do two architects equal an engineer? They were divided on that, on opinion on that. I don't know if you read the whole thing, but it seems to me that there was a terrible slip that the origins of which we cannot put our fingers on, but it seemed like we ignored some pretty important evidence, and I was wondering if anybody has an idea about sending this out or getting someone to review it, to tighten it up or whatever. The land development ordinance, it seems like it's a problem.
Are you suggesting that we should put some kind of,
Teeth in it?
or words in it when it goes over a certain slope or a certain soil type? Is that what
Well,
you're
yeah, I guess I always thought those were in there.
saying? I thought they were too.
So I just thought maybe we could, at some future time, maybe go back. I think I have a flow chart from the original ordinance. I guess I'm concerned about that.
When you say send it out for somebody to look at,
To see if it's accomplishing our
like
goals.
an engineer, an engineering firm?
Or maybe an environmental lawyer, someone who has competence in that area. We could see if it's doing what we think it's doing.
Nancy, as I remember, you and I were on council when that passed.
We're the last ones to sign on to it, too.
We were, and did that not change substantially because of a lot of citizens' objection that was looking at a free enterprise approach to it, and the final thing that we passed, I think, did take some soils-type language out of it.
I think the soils language is still in it.
It's been a long time since I've looked at that.
How many years?
That would have been 91.
Oh, I've got one from 88 here for a minute from now, but, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe our starting point should be, we need to all go back and look at it and read it ourselves and give it a little thought and then discuss the possibilities of what we need to do.
Okay. Did you mention that you have another item, or is that for a different committee?
It was just a 1988 newspaper article I found. Council talks of littering, loud parties and parking. It'll be more pertinent in a few minutes, so I'll read the same line again.
Any other miscellaneous items for planning and development? If not, then we're adjourned.
Okay, so the Environmental Committee is going. I have several items on it. Tobacco Prevention Programs Coordinator is requesting some signage, and recycling education, some miscellaneous. I think the first one would be Tobacco Prevention Program Coordinator Tanya Eggenberger, and she wants to talk a little bit about the hookah establishments.
I
You
think
might want to move one of the
yeah.
mics over.
We don't have mics there, Dr. Gaskell, so when you do speak, we'll
Can we move
okay.
one of those over, or is that too far over?
I may not speak, she may have. They all do the same.
There you go.
Does that work?
Yeah, we don't want to hear the mayor this time anyway, do we?
Thank you very much. I'm the Tobacco Prevention Coordinator at the Athens City County Health Department and also the chair of the Athens County Tobacco Prevention Coalition. Hookahs, or water pipes, originate from the Middle East, Asia, and North Africa, and their devices are these big contraptions to smoke tobacco out of. Hookah cafes and bars are opening all over the U.S., especially in college towns, and just last week, the first hookah cafe opened here in Athens, and then another one is opening shortly. So this is of great concern to both the Health Department and the Tobacco Prevention Coalition. We're concerned because hookah smoking attracts young people. This tobacco is flavored, so it tastes good, and it feels less harsh because it's being cooled by this water chamber. And unfortunately, because it's cooled and feels less harsh, there's a myth that it's healthier or a safer alternative to smoking cigarettes. Unfortunately, that's not true. And we know that smoking hookahs are becoming popular here in Athens as well. We did a survey recently showing that 40% of 466 OU students have tried smoking a hookah, yet only 30% of the 466 students knew of any hookah-related health effects. So it's attracting people who think it's safer than cigarettes and who don't necessarily smoke cigarettes. Studies show that hookah smoking is not safer than smoking cigarettes. Hookah smoke contains nicotine, it contains carbon monoxide, tar, a lot of chemicals like cobalt, arsenic, and lead. And these are the same chemicals that cause heart disease, respiratory disease, cancers, and addiction. Several studies show the short and long-term health effects of hookah smoking. Last year, the World Health Organization came out with an advisory basically recommending that hookah smoking be considered the same as all other forms of tobacco and also be prohibited in public places. What we're asking is that an ordinance be written to require a warning label. So this would be a clear and noticeable and easily read warning label, and it would be placed in the entrances to hookah establishments and on the front page of hookah menus. This is an effective and inexpensive public health education program. The required cigarette package warning label from 1965 was a significant step in educating the public about tobacco. So the warning label that we recommend is hookah smoking causes lung, heart, and other diseases and cancers. Hookah smoke contains nicotine, and hookah smoking is not a safe alternative to cigarettes. This warning label is essential because hookah smoking is a new phenomenon. People are not aware of the health effects of smoking a hookah. And when you buy cigarettes, there's a warning label on the package. But when you order a hookah, the tobacco comes already prepared and ready to smoke. There's no warning label with it. So people could be smoking the hookah without even knowing that there are health effects related to it. It's a common practice to have a warning label on products when they're found to be dangerous or even potentially dangerous.
Questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Is there any research to indicate that warning labels actually have an effect on people's behavior? I'm just curious about this, whether or not it deters anybody.
Right. That's a good question. It's hard to tease out. I looked this up actually today, and
Okay.
It's hard to tease out the effects because a lot of it is associated with media. So there's a lot of media coverage or public health campaigns that are done in addition to it. Not enough research has been done. We believe it's effective, but more research needs to be done on that.
Okay.
Bill?
At the risk of getting on a soapbox here, but I'm going to do it. Having been the executive director of Hickory Creek for 2.5 years, having been a nursing home administrator now for 23 years, I have seen, firsthand exactly what smoking does to people. You don't see it because the people are in a back back room gasping for a breath. They are on oxygen in back rooms of nursing homes. They're not out in public walking down Court Street. I lost my mother to cigarette addiction. My brother has it. I smoked for 20 years. A couple of years ago, we were getting fairly serious about outlawing cigarette smoke in indoors here, a complete thing. There was a time this council was fairly progressive. We were the first to have curbside recycling in the state, I believe. I think we were one of the first to ever even talk about getting rid of cigarette smoke indoors in public buildings. And why we didn't follow through with it, I think I know, I'm not going to say, but I hope we can take that one up again. Huh?
Said you live near it?
No one wanted to pay the political price. Frankly and bluntly, that's what it was. And, you know, why don't we just look at that again? The law director told us last week in Chambers that he thought that probably warning labels and forcing somebody to put up a sign would be more difficult to do than eliminate cigarette smoke altogether. You know, now, after we tried to deal with it a couple of years ago, Franklin County has gotten rid of it, the state of California has gotten rid of it, the state of New York has gotten rid of it. Conservative bastions like Toledo, Ohio has gotten rid of it, and we still have it. So that's my comment on this. We're talking about a sign? Dr. Gaskell.
Thank you, Bill. I agree with you entirely. The most important activity we can do in public health, of course, is to prevent disease. And I don't think there's any doubt that cigarette smoking and cigar smoking causes lots of disease. And we all have our own family, personal experiences with that. So this measure of passing an ordinance to allow us to put signs in hookah establishments would be helpful. A step further, like you mentioned, Bill, would be more helpful. And it depends upon whether council is ready to pay the political price and undertake this endeavor. But it would be important, and I would applaud you if you were to seriously take that issue up again. We would all be very pleased at the health department. I think there's no doubt in anybody's mind that indoor smoking in bars and restaurants is terribly hazardous to your health. And anybody that comes back from California, where they have outlawed smoking in bars, restaurants, all indoor places, they come back and talk about how nice it is and how refreshing it is to come back and not have to worry about whether you're exposed to smoke in bars. And they don't seem to have trouble enforcing it. We need to remember that New York City is smoke-free.
Ireland.
Ireland, the whole country of Ireland and Italy. Smoke-free.
Italy. I was there last fall where I think the whole country smokes, and none of them do it inside now. You know, it's amazing. If they could do it.
Carol?
My question is there any thing coming up on a state or federal labeling request for hookahs? I'm not opposed to our doing it. I think it's a good start, but it concerned me when this first hit the news that here was a business that seemed to be going to what I believed was counter to health advice. And so I was wondering what is happening on the state and federal level.
Because it's such a new phenomenon, there hasn't been much done so far. I believe New Orleans tried it. They were stopped by the hurricane. Anaheim, California, they came up with an ordinance stating that you couldn't have entertainment, you couldn't have food, alcohol in a hookah establishment. So there have been ordinances that are stronger than just a warning label. But as far as I know, there isn't such an ordinance.
And how would this be affected if there were a statewide smoking ban Where does hookah fit into that?
That's a good question. Smoke-Free Ohio, as it's written.
Right.
They could stay open if they were qualified, if they qualified as a retail tobacco store, which meant that 80% of their revenue would have to come from tobacco alone. So they would have to probably get rid of the food part of it.
Okay. So it could be impacted, but not necessarily.
Right.
I just want to say that I would support this. I mean, as a warning label on wine. I mean, and this seems like a health hazard, and it would seem appropriate to have a warning sign. I would support it.
Anybody else?
I questioned whether if they were using them in the establishments, if they would be separated. People just eating food from those are using the hookah?
It's not separated right now.
Mm-hmm.
At least, that's what I see.
And I haven't had a chance to go up and look.
Do
But it would
people go there if they're not
I don't know.
participating?
I don't know.
You there today?
No, it's a different ethnic food. I think people would be.
Okay.
I just wondered why, if that was, I actually called Ray Haslett to find out if he knew anything about it, and he didn't. Because of the Clean Indoor Air Act, it would seem that it would be.
You know, Colorado has an ordinance about indoor smoking.
Not yet.
Not yet, okay, because it seems to me that when I was there, you know, there wasn't smoking in restaurants, and I found it to
Denver, I
be
think.
very
Excuse
pleasant.
me.
Yeah, Denver.
Denver
has it.
does, I
Okay,
think.
then that's my
Well,
memory's
but the
correct
bars
there.
still have the smoking in
Bars
Denver.
do, it's just
Yeah,
restaurants.
restaurants.
Okay, anybody else want to add anything else?
Actually, if I could add one more thing, I agree with you, Bill, I fully would support, it'd be great if we could do a clean indoor air ordinance here.
I'm not seeing anybody come forward and sign on and say, I would like to lead this charge, though, am I?
And the momentum really is towards going smoke-free. We have 21 communities in Ohio already smoke-free, 11 states smoke-free. I think that would be great.
There are
And it would
11
take care
states
of it.
smoke-free
So you
now.
would support
11
it?
states, yeah.
Sure.
We'll discuss it next time.
Okay.
The momentum is gaining ground. Yeah, we'd be happy with a first little step, maybe, deal with the hookah ordinance first, and
A sign.
then talk some more about it.
That's brave.
Okay, do you have any idea when the other hooker establishment?
The other hookers.
Good,
No, I don't know.
okay, so you don't know when they're opening up?
I'll be back to talk about other health issues.
Okay, so it sounds like the other people would like to see something like this move forward.
Yeah, I would support this as well,
Okay.
if I can say that.
What I will do is I'm probably going to talk to the law director and see if this works, and then we can put it through. But probably not the next meeting, city council meeting, but the one afterwards. Is that okay? And the main reason is I think that's in the middle of spring break on this, and I want to get some feedback from the other parties. As for making indoor smoking ban, we can bring that up at my next meeting.
Yes.
Okay?
We've already agreed to do it.
Very good.
Sounds like it's going to happen.
Thank you.
This may be a change. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next one on my agenda is recycling education. Lorraine McCoster is actually hired by our council and to look at recycling and composting and education means. Oh, here it is.
More paper.
More paper, okay, here you go. Sure. And I just wanted her to give us a progress report on what's going on and what she's been doing and where we're going to go.
My name is Lorraine McCosker. I'm now working with City Council as a recycling intern/consultant. I am also a graduate student in environmental studies, and for 15 years I did previously work as a public health nurse in many capacities as well as an educator to adults as well as children. So just the packet is just, I'm going to try to fly through this. I know time is precious. The outline of what I'll do. The proposal that I originally submitted is 3 pages, and then it follows up with different inserts that I'll go through. Historically, solid waste legislation was passed in 1988 by the Ohio legislature, initiating a comprehensive statewide planning process at the state and local level. The goal, a statewide goal, emerged from this to decrease Ohio's waste stream by 25% on a per capita basis through recycling and waste reduction. This was achieved in 1994. The 2001 Solid Waste Management Plan instituted a 50% decrease of the waste stream through recycling and reduction by 2005. And these obviously have not been reached in Athens. I'm not sure in other areas of the state. But as we're broken into the 53 solid waste management districts, our solid waste management district rates around 11 to 13% for recycling and solid waste reduction. So if you go through my proposal, past that, we have a breakdown of our recycling rates in Athens currently. And this is provided by Mr. Hazlitt from 1999 through 2005. And we run right around 25% within the city itself. What happens is our numbers go down when we go to the district, the Solid Waste Management District. My goal as an intern consultant is to encourage the reduction of solid waste and biodegradable products into the landfill through recycling education and waste reduction in student neighborhoods. Through educational outreach, a sense of stewardship may be fostered by students for streets and yards, encouraging care and a sense of place within these communities. And within my scope of services, I've created some areas, and one is to develop a typology of why recycling is not occurring in certain areas through observations and surveys. And to find out what some of these barriers are to students and to other residents, to provide recycling education, to interface with other organizations in the community that are working on this, to interface with businesses that are and are not recycling, and to involve students and other community members in a waste diversion process. So I began creating a database of what was exactly happening on specific streets, and I targeted West State Street, North and South Congress, North and South High, and then the streets that come off of Mill and Mill Street. And those were chosen because those are very high-density streets for students. They're primarily just students living in that area. And whenever I've observed over the years that students who are integrated into more community areas are much more likely to have, to be doing recycling and also to be having solid waste that was following the solid waste ordinance. So there's a little sheet here that's in your packet, and I would specifically on Monday mornings before the trash people came out, start walking the streets. And I have on here a little schematic with trash cans with tops, without tops, the number of bags, the number of cardboard boxes I'm seeing, if there's trash can overflow, recycling, if it's sorted properly, if there's recycling contamination, meaning if other things are in the recycling making it impossible to recycle, if there's recycling in trash cans and litter. I'm not picking through trash, but I'm observing it. So. And what I found in this is that, first of all, it's very useful to establish a perspective of the behaviors doing this. I'm seeing who has an idea about how to manage their solid waste following the solid waste ordinance, and who is also recycling. And some students are doing it very well. They're using tops on their trash cans. They're using recycling containers in one capacity or another. But with this information, what would I like to do with it? First of all, I'll be doing surveys in those communities and getting some feedback from students about what their perception is about recycling and the barriers, and also just their knowledge base about it. And I will also try to identify block leaders, and those people can be used as resources within the neighborhoods to do education, to act as mentors, role models, and to provide a support for students with regard to solid waste. Solid block leaders have been used since probably the late 70s in urban areas with a variety of issues. It could be from civil rights issues to gardening to educating people about what's available in their community, also water conservation. A city like Austin has 250 volunteer block leaders, and those are people that have qualified, they've had some training, and they're very useful in that community. So what I'd like to do is involve students. I think students are a key player in this. Aside from enforcement, we really need students to be modeling behaviors like recycling to other students. And we saw how strongly that was with the Jones Brothers and the Beautification Day. That's exactly what we need, are some really strong student leaders that are helping. Some states or cities are also doing something called a master recycling program, where people get very intense training. They want to get the training, they even pay to get the training, and they provide resources in the community as volunteers and mentors again. I'd also like to encourage businesses to be involved. I would like to create a database of businesses who are recycling and who are not, and then discuss recycling options with these business owners and provide information to these businesses about recycling. If students are going from the campus, where there's very good access to recycling, to their businesses where they're spending their money and they can also recycle there, then they can take it home, and there's continuity in that whole process. Businesses also can be a resource to provide education. They could have sorting information right there, even displays. And I think landlords are a resource. Landlords have a huge effect on our economy in Athens. About 72% of the property is owned by landlords, and these are a really important resource for us. I think the landlord-tenant agreement that was passed by City Council in December is a great way to approach it. We could also add recycling and solid waste education within that, so that students or people are signing that, and the landlord has a responsibility to provide that education. And if we want to be pretty radical, we can also try mandatory recycling. And that's also being implemented in many cities. Now, of course, we're not going to have somebody probably picking through the trash again, but at least it's providing an ethic and an ethos that says, this is what's important to our community. Let's try it. I've been working with Paul Wheel and Mr. Hazlitt, and things that the city can do, we can provide new recycling bins. We have not provided recycling bins in the city since the early 1990s. Now, people can buy those, but the law or the regulation has been each person gets one. The house is distributed one, and then if that person happens to move or leave or something, it's not renewed. So I think we need new bins across the board in the city. That would be my recommendation. We've also been discussing standardized garbage receptacles. Many cities have gone this way. When you have standardized receptacles, there's a certain way that the trash is dealt with, the solid waste is dealt with. There's a good, strong lid on top. Oftentimes they have wheels, and people can order them in different gallon capacities. This would keep a lot of the solid waste and the litter off of the street by providing this. It could also be done in small sections where we target small areas of the town and then move forward with that because of the cost. The other option is having bags where everybody buys those bags and then they're put out. And that's the only thing that's picked up. I think the shortcoming of that is we have a problem with bags already in the city. Oftentimes they're loaded high, there are mountains of them. We have storage issues where they're placed, and also animals get into them, and then litter is strewn about. I see solid waste enforcement as a huge problem. We have a solid waste ordinance that is not being followed. About 85% of what I'm observing in these student neighborhoods, people do not use tops on their trash cans. It's a very simple thing, but when you don't have a top, the solid waste continues to grow. It comes out, it moves around, and there you have our litter problem right there with that issue. The other thing is storage of the trash receptacles. That doesn't seem to be followed. And I think we could have an update on the city webpage with recycling information. Community contacts right now, I've been working with Jim Hentz with the off-campus living office, and he has 14 community assistants, and I included his newsletter in here. And you can see where his community assistants are on here, what their names are and where they're located. And these are the high student intense neighborhoods. And I did training with those students about proper solid waste and disposal, as well as recycling and sorting. And they were very concerned about the solid waste issues. They see it, they see the litter in their community. He has asked me to do a training for his community assistants for next year, and he's also expressed an interest in having them become block leaders. So you will have students right within those streets who are trained in solid waste management and recycling. They can act as supports for students, role models, and also in many communities, they get out the night before and they knock on doors and say, you know, come on, let's get your trash out, let's get the recycling out. I've been interfacing with Clean Committee. I've gone out on trash patrol with Mike Cooper from the Health Department on several Saturdays. And when he tickets, this is the notice he puts on the door. And then he also is creating a database of housing units and he marks the number of containers, whether they have tops, whether the storage is visible from the street, and if there are problems. He then goes back to code enforcement and finds out who is the owner of that property, and will be sending them some letter in some capacity notifying them that they're out of compliance. I've been working with Ed Newman. I attended the beautification meeting that was a few weeks ago, and also various community members. And I am also going to begin working on, after spring break, a compost project at East Elementary. I was involved with compost, community compost pickup for a year as a volunteer, picking up compost from businesses in Athens. And we had been working for a year, meeting, discussing a curbside composting project. And we wrote a grant, several people with EPA. That was not funded, but at that time Mr. Bogerber expressed an interest in doing this. So he already has 2 huge tumblers from a previous grant. I'll be working with teachers as well as educating students and getting some student leaders. So we'll be composting waste out of his kitchen, not his kitchen, out of the cafeteria, and educating students as well, educating the families, and several families have come to me already and said they would like backyard compost units and education.
Any questions? Bill?
I've noticed in the last 3 years, your percentage, we seem to be falling off the recycling wagon a little bit, don't we?
Yeah.
Let's see.
As both a percentage of
From Ray Hazlett.
the total, this,
And the trash is increasing,
from 99 through about 2003, it was going up, and then it starts going down a little bit.
So I think that that's telling us we need to increase our recycling education. We need to put more of an ethic out there that that's important to our community. We have a wonderful community.
Oh, I agree. I don't
And
think
that-
it's anything you folks are doing wrong. I think
It's telling us that, yeah.
we've gotten complacent.
Okay, Bojinka?
Yeah, I was going to say, this is a huge scope of, of research and work here. I mean, it's a lot of really interesting and good information.
Thank you.
And I was going to say, what, you know, are there some priorities here that you're planning to work on in the next few months? Or are you working on all of this? Kind of a lot.
Well, our priority is to work in the student neighborhoods, certainly, and I think to get those block leaders in place, to see what the barriers are to recycling for students, to get the bins circulated, to get our garbage receptacles. I think
To
that
get
would
what
be huge.
circulated?
Recycling bins. We have
Oh, the bins.
recycling bins, yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And then to work with business owners. I think that that's a resource that is underutilized. I mean, a lot of people, business owners, are not recycling. They could be providing education. They could be having a little recycling display right in their
Yeah.
business window in some capacity.
Well, I was thinking, I imagine, you know, businesses have a lot of paper and other, you know, whatever, pizza boxes, you know, whatever. Okay, so I would think, you know, working with businesses would be important. But I was going to say, to expect them to, like, educate others is a little, you know, I don't know if that's.
Well,
Right.
what I meant was to provide literature, to have literature out.
Yeah.
And I think I think the landlords are a very important
Yes.
resource. If they're educating their tenants about solid waste management, and I think over and over, it's a huge issue in this community, be it recycling or disposal, and if it was written into the tenant agreement, I think it could be very powerful. I think there are a few landlords who actually do it now, who have taken that responsibility on.
Are there currently some brochures? Or would that be an
Oh, yes,
additional?
yeah, no, we don't plan to make the brochures. We have a huge laminate, I didn't bring it actually, a
It's
recycling
downstairs.
laminate.
It's at the utilities billing office, right, the green
We
ones?
have a huge supply of those. And there was also lots of literature that we might be able to access from the Solid Waste Management District.
Okay, I have one more thing.
Yeah.
I was just looking at this notice, and I find it really hard to read, and I don't really want to read it. So I'm just saying that, you know, it seems to me that, you know, maybe a more readable,
It does hurt your eyes.
it hurts your eyes.
It does.
And so I was going to say.
It's actually on bright green when he
Oh,
describes.
but even when right green, that would be worse. I mean, it was maybe a little more care in terms of the communication that goes out. I mean, I guess this is from the city.
It's actually from the Health
From
Department.
the health department.
And they're
Okay.
listening.
And they're listening. You know, in other words, you know, make the thing a little more readable and attractive, and, you know, to kind of, obviously, we want to say that these are the rules, but somehow make it so people would actually read it.
You want a different font, you're saying?
I want a different font. I mean, if we want to get really specific, I mean, usually, studies have shown that all uppercase is very, very hard to read. You're supposed to use uppercase, lowercase, but, you know, that's a design issue.
Well, I think it's an authoritative notice. I mean, and, I mean, when you're out
Notice the
there
fines at
and
the bottom.
the trash is this high and
Never
it's
worked well for me.
unibout.
I know, it could be authoritative, but it could be serious looking, but it could still look like something that was important to read. This kind of looks like it's yelling at me. I'm just saying, so I wouldn't want to read it. So,
She needs to go on the Saturday morning tour.
no, but.
We would like to invite some council members on that. That would be really,
So I just want to see if there's a way, and I'm happy to work with people, and there are lots of design people around, to kind of create material that speaks to the issue in a
That's a good
serious
idea.
way, but, you know, is a little more attractive.
Debbie, did you have something?
I just wanted to say, if you're talking about doing, working with folks who want to do backyard composting, We, the Community Food Initiatives has a project that is supported in part by the city and, in the area of trying to reduce the waste stream. So would suggest that you talk with the folks at CFI and try to coordinate with them. Okay, this is already all connected?
Yes,
Somewhat, yeah.
Okay,
some of it.
great.
But that's great, yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I had something I wanted to say. From a student perspective and from somebody who does live off campus and tries to recycle as much as we can, for one of the reasons, because it cuts down on us having to pay for garbage bins to actually put trash out. I mean, I live in a house of 5 people, and there's a lot of trash that accumulates each week. So I'm wondering, as far as the recycling goes, when I lived on campus, I recycled a lot more, it seemed like, because there was more of an incentive, more of a push. The recycle mania that they have on campus, it was like this competition, let's beat all the other schools across the nation and recycle as much as we can. So I'm wondering if there isn't something that can be done with the off-campus, which is very similar to that, in competition with maybe with other communities, or providing some sort of maybe incentive to where it might instill a sense of pride in wanting to recycle a lot and pushing students to do recycling. And then I had a question about the mandatory recycling programs. This was something that I talked about when I was running for city council. How do mandatory recycling programs work in other cities, or how are they?
Well, I know the city of Seattle, if there's 25% of the waste could be recycled, that's when they're ticketed. And they're very serious about their solid waste issues. They have landfill issues. They don't have huge landfills like we still have in Ohio to divert our waste to. And they've put a lot of money into environmental programs, so they have employed people to do that. Now, I don't know the increments of violations and so forth, but there actually is some kind of person that is looking at that.
Right.
Do you know how they do that? I mean, do they literally go through people's trash? And
Yes, they do.
Wow.
Another
And
job I'd want.
you can actually go to their website. They have a little click through a virtual tour of their recycling plant, and when you see just how much solid waste there is and what a huge issue it is, it's pretty humbling.
I have another question, just a general question about recycling that you might be able to answer. Why doesn't Ohio recycle green glass? I mean, I know when I was out in
The
Oregon.
green gas, because there's no market for it right now. And I don't know that it's Ohio, it's our solid waste management district.
Okay.
You can actually take it to certain places in Columbus and have it recycled.
Right, I know when I was in Oregon, when I was visiting a friend, she could recycle the
But
green
it's
glass.
just they don't have a market right now.
For it.
They're real good in our solid waste district in selling these products. And it's a really nice tour to do as well, going to the plant. But
Carol?
Could we approach the topic of reduce your garbage bill by having fewer bags and approach it somewhat that way instead of in an in-your-face method of, say, save money? Your trash bill could go down to the 1 bag level or 1 can level if you recycle.
Well, I've had some discussions, you're part of the committee, realize, in that sense. I've had some discussions with Joe Castler about this and Ray Haslett about it. And if you remember when we changed the rates, a year and a half ago, I think John Nels got in front of us and saying, we really should have a different rate. I think it's $5.50, $9.50, and the idea is that that's a small increment for 1 bag can versus 2 cans. And he was saying, well, we really have it so it's, one is $5.50, the other one's much more than that, doubling or
15.
something.
Right, I
13
agree.
or 14,
Yeah.
yes.
Pay as
And-
you throw, and we
Well,
talked about that a lot.
we are pay as you throw, but we're just not
But
that
even
steep.
more,
Yes,
right.
more so. So this could be brought up to council, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think this is a more complicated issue once you start that, because right now, if you don't put trash out, you're still charged. I mean, in other words, once we get into the situation where we say, we're counting your bags, then we get into the situation about people who are away, as I have often been, and I say, well, can I have 2 bags next week? Absolutely not. So I just think it really becomes very complex if you have the trash people counting.
The truck still has to drive around, there's always a base rate
I
that's
know.
going on.
I know.
And right now, as we have now, I do one bag. I do have some tickets. You basically have a system where you have the ticket bag is $150, and an untagged bag, extra bag is $3. So there's incentive to plan ahead.
I know that, but what
Okay.
I'm saying is that you pay if you have more, but if you have less, you get no reduction. So I'm saying, once you open the can of worms and you say, you pay for however much trash you have, I'm just saying,
Oh, yeah,
people
yeah.
who have no trash are going to say, I want a rebate or something like that. So I'm just saying,
We've heard that before.
it becomes
We have.
complicated.
We've had actually somebody said they generated no trash.
They left it
Right,
uptown in
right,
dumps in
right.
the...
Oh, okay.
And sued us.
Right, okay, but they didn't
yeah.
want to pay. But I know, my mother lives in a place where, you pay for your bag, so there's a huge incentive not to have much trash because you're paying by the number of bags that you have each time. Well, you buy a bag
Yes,
and then you put it
yes.
out. So I know there are cities that do that.
That's actually, Ray Haslett's been bringing that up, and Joe Kassler of the Waste Hocking,
Yeah.
Athens Hocking Waste District, have both thought, because it's a prepaid system, and
Right.
it makes it much easier to monitor who's throwing out what, because there have been cases where people take their garbage and move it 2 doors over, and, if you're not there, you don't know. I mean, basically, it's like, that's not my trash, I didn't get here, now why am I paying for it? So there's these conditions.
Yeah, I think the bag thing works better in a suburban environment, but if you
Yes,
go in
that's
this close-in neighborhoods.
Right.
Okay,
Okay, I just want one more question about these community assistants.
Go ahead.
Because the students, a lot of these students will be gone in 1 or 2 years, and then you have a whole new crop of students. So now, this is just another kind of brainstorm, but I wonder, what's the incentive for these people to, monitor other people's trash? I'm just saying, it's not a very exciting job. And unless there were, and this would require a lot of landlord cooperation, but maybe some of these people who were willing to do this work, because it's significant, kind of community work, that, maybe there's something in it for the landlords, and they get, this particular person gets a tiny cut in their rent every once in a while, so that it becomes more of a community activity that people care about and that the landlords are on board with it. But, that's a big sell.
They get paid by the university now, though.
Yeah.
Oh, they're paid by the university,
The
too.
community
Oh, they're
assistants
paid.
are,
They're
but the
paid.
block leaders, if they were just volunteers, would be doing it because it's something that interests them. And we all volunteer in some capacity in our lives, so, and when we're teaching good solid waste skills, that's a skill you need throughout your life. And I think we'd be offering a very good service to students to be giving them that they can take that to the suburbs or to the inner city, wherever they're going to move, or to the rural area.
I think it's kind of a hard sell. However, for some
I really
people.
don't. I
You
came
don't?
from a
Okay.
community where we had a very involved recycling program.
Okay.
And I think it's quite very possible. It's happening everywhere.
Okay.
Amy?
This is about the block leaders. Yeah, I certainly, just in contrast with what you're saying, I think that you would find people who would be willing to be block leaders, throughout the whole community. I certainly would be interested. I see that there's nobody for West Union Street or anything like that, but I certainly would be interested, and I think that
Great.
many other people would be. I don't think it's a hard sell necessarily. I think it's something that people, will want to do. Like I keep saying, a sense of pride in this community and making it, more beautiful. And I think people would really, latch on to that. So.
Great.
Okay, Lorraine's going to be giving us other presentations later down the pike as progress goes on. You will notice in your package, she also put out the Athens Hocking Waste District and Recycling Center newsletter. I noticed it's issue 1, volume 1, or volume 1, number 1, February of this, so they have an education component going on. Part of the thing about the recycling bins is that we haven't had any, and if the garbage fund is flush enough, I would like to see us at least reprime the city somehow, mostly because it has been so many years. I notice I've been walking around looking at the recycling, and many people require more than 1 bin to recycle. I've seen people with those pickle buckets and milk crates and stuff like that, and if we could do that just to prime the pump, we may be able to get a little bit more percentage out. And I don't have the numbers with me. I don't know, Lorraine, did you bring the prices that Ray sent us? No?
I did not.
I didn't either. He sent us some information. They're usually buying a set of about 400 a shot. But the idea is we could buy a larger mass. The breakdown's not much better with the larger volumes.
It was about 710 with the smallest amount, and then 675 when you got up to several thousand each.
Yeah.
Then you have a storage problem.
Yes, and that's the other thing there. But the idea really would be to either, not so much, the way I've been discussing with Ray is either not so much my concept was just put one on every doorstep. His concept is, have everybody come in who needs one, pick one up. And when you say, free of charge, in one sense, it's going to be coming out of the bills anyway. I've been trying to get a handle on the solid waste issue since this is my second term, and I really didn't do as much in terms of finding out things that I'd like to in the first term. I've been attending the solid waste meetings once a month and having discussions there, at least listening to what goes on and how the system works. Again, this is an ongoing project. It's always being generated. But as I say, keeping in the back of my mind is maybe the idea of springing for a good many of these. And as I say, I think right now the garbage fund is in the black, although not terribly. And from what I'm hearing from Joe Kassler is that the prices probably will go up. We can expect that too. I think that's it for the solid waste. Unless anybody wants to add anything else.
I guess I want to pick up with what Amy said,
Okay.
in terms of an education program, like, what is it, I mean, there are several slogans or some kind of, attention, educational component, I think, would be really nice. I mean, we lack a local television, except for the government channel, it's a good role for them, and on the website, but maybe have that as a real initiative. What is it, reduce?
Reuse, recycle.
Exactly.
Well, Recycle Mania was the thing on campus where the
Yeah.
schools are competing. And I got, really excited
Right.
when we would be dropping in the ranks, so I would recycle more.
Right,
and-
but even just some kind of a slogan to raise attention to the issue, I think would be really good.
Well, I think we could have a big city campaign, and we might be able to generate it around something like an Earth Day or around a Recycle Week or something like that.
I mean, yeah, you might even be able to jumpstart it off of the beautification
The
day,
clean-
really
Mhm.
start the education then and then
I
spread it.
suggest September, because about 3,000 of them are going to leave.
Oh, that's true.
Of course, they're going to throw a lot of stuff away.
They'll take it home to their.
Apparently in June,
their other
that's a huge problem with trash.
Okay.
It's their biggest month.
But also, the Clean Committee has been working on this, and they've just put together a recycling video, and that's going to be distributed. Apparently, Jim Hentz is going to make a whole lot of copies and distribute them to students. So he's going to begin working with them as well, so that'll be helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks, Chuck. Chuck back there, thanks for the forms and stuff like that. I guess you know about this one now. Thanks.
Okay.
And the other one, the inspection report, that's nice, I like that too. I have no other miscellaneous unless somebody else does. Carol, Bajinka? Anybody? Okay, I guess I'm done with my...
Oh, I'm not on that committee, it's Jim.
Jim, sorry, Jim.
Oh, I think we...
Is that, okay, we're going to open a Finance and Personnel Committee. We have 4 issues that we want to discuss. All of them have to do with recurring programs that the mayor applies for grants to work with, and we need to pass authorizing ordinances to allow that to happen. So the first one is a community housing improvement grant, community housing improvement program grant. That's where the CHIP comes in, which we heard from
Doug Stanley?
Doug Stanley from Tri-County Community Action, whose office has handled these grants for several years for us. So next week, we would like to put up an ordinance authorizing the mayor to submit a fiscal year 2006 CHIP grant to the Ohio Department of Development and designate the Hocking-Athens Perry Community Action Agency as the CHIP program grant contract administrator.
Okay.
Any questions about that, concerns, we'll bring that up next week.
No problem.
Second one is a similar ordinance request authorizing the mayor to submit an application for an emergency shelter grant agreement through the Ohio Department of Development and Good Works. This is a pass-through from Ohio Department of Development, comes through the city of Athens for Good Works to operate a shelter and programs that flow out of that. This, I believe, is an annual thing that we do.
I forget how much that was usually. They usually get about 60, 70, is that, if you know offhand?
I don't recall it being that much, Mayor.
I think it's 50,000.
50,000?
And so we'll bring that up.
Okay.
Third one is a drug abuse resistance education, or DARE, law enforcement grant. Again, this is an annual application that the mayor makes for some funds that would pay up to 50% of a police officer's salary when he or she is designated as the DARE officer who goes into schools and presents the program. This is, Bojanka, you?
I'm looking perplexed, because I know that we're down in terms of officers, and so I'm just curious. I mean, the other half of this person is a full-duty police officer, right?
Yeah, I think
I
so,
guess.
yeah.
He spends about more than what the grant pays on his dare time. He is the officer that during the school year is pretty much in the schools. Has some training time in the summer, and then is used like mostly on weekends on an overtime basis.
I was just wondering what the impact of that position is on the staffing of the police department. Just
You
maybe.
could look at it with any of the different programs we're running over there. You could do it, the Violence Against Women grant that we get, and
Yeah.
say, should we take those people off of that? Same thing with the investigations units, et cetera. So, we're right now, from what is budgeted and funded, we are one officer down from that standpoint. But we do have an officer that's on workers' compensation leave and another one that's on military leave. But we have hired 2 officers in the last 4 months.
This particular program, I happened to be at the community center about a year ago when they had their annual recognition banquet for school-age people, young people who were involved in the program. There were scores and scores of school children and their parents who came to this to be recognized and receive a certificate that they had completed the program and participated in it. It was obviously a very effective program in our school system.
Okay, because I've heard varying reports
In
about
other
DARE.
communities, there seem to have been some disappointments, but in our community, it has seemed to be a very effective program.
And I would just add that in our community, it builds a great deal of rapport and relationships for young children. Officer Rick goes on field trips and helps out with school plays, and, it really is a program that I think is working well in our community.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually did the DARE program. Probably, I don't know if everybody in here did, but 5th grade was a lot, not so far back for me. And the DARE program was great. I mean, it was the best part of 5th grade. I mean, it was really effective. And like you said, I mean, people gather at the DARE, the ceremony, and it was very effective. And for growing up, looking forward to that in 5th grade and getting that education was very good.
Okay.
I would also point out, just from the conversation with the council earlier today, the idea of building rapport between police and community. I mean, of course, this is elementary school versus college, but at the same time, it's got to start someplace.
Great, okay.
So we'll also bring that up on Monday. And the final recurring event that I'd like to bring up is request for an ordinance authorizing the mayor to submit an application to the Ohio Department of Development for Community Development Block Grant, CDBG grant, for the calendar year 2006. And this is the Small Cities Formula Program, which, as I think you said, Mayor, at this point, we don't know what will be available to us.
It depends upon what budget cuts go through Congress, but it's been reducing over the years, but it's probably 100,000.
Utilized for?
Various projects. This year, it's doing at the water plant, a safety project for the water wells. It's done. Primarily, I've been using it for the uptown traffic signalization, mast iron, and the computerization of the signals there. And that's gone on for about 5 years of it, maybe 6. But it can be used. There's a set of criteria for low and moderate income areas of the city that it can be done for a lot of infrastructure type projects that would be needed to be done.
Okay. And so although we'd be making application now, these would be funds that would be available for our calendar year of 2007. Paul, I think you had a hand up.
I'm confused. Now, did Melissa the last time say that the mix had changed on this? The competitive was being put together with the non-competitive, or am I thinking the transportation grant?
That's the transportation.
Okay, got the wrong thing. Okay.
There are other community block development funds that are competitive, but so far they've hung on to the formula grant both for cities and counties.
Okay.
Last year, we were talking about Stimson Avenue sidewalks in particular because the Disabilities Commission identified that as their top priority in terms of ramps and broken curbs and things that were on the sidewalks. And we're all in receipt of a letter from another individual talking to us about problems with sidewalks. So I know at that time, there was a request for qualifications sent out to really look overall at Stimson Avenue, and so that project got kind of set aside because there was the possibility of really doing a more comprehensive project on Stimson Avenue, and I guess I would like to just remind us all and reiterate that that's a need that's been identified if the area qualifies for CDBG.
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, one more issue. This issue will also be first reading for an ordinance next Monday. And to back up a moment, when Doug Stanley was here last week, it was pointed out that our application for the CHIP grant is due April 8th or something like that. We have a meeting the first week of April, which would be probably our second reading of this. We would probably have to suspend at that point to get it done. Okay. The only miscellaneous I have right now is that next Monday at 6:30, with the auditor, we'll continue to have our discussions about the financial programs within the city in the city council office. Any other miscellaneous? Not at this time.
Good.
Thank you.
All right, we'll call a Transportation Committee to order. First thing is taxi regulations, to which Member Patterson will talk to you about.
Okay, I'll try to be brief, and I do apologize for the person who came to talk to this issue at having such a long wait. I did email the current draft to everybody, and I think I've cleaned up the typos and the spelling errors since that time. The only real changes since the last time we looked at this was on page 10. Debbie asked about the putting additional people in the cab and how to charge out that rate. What we've done at this point is just taken that out of the ordinance and put it on the committee that decides the rates and works with the cab owners on the rates because there seems to be differences in how that's handled in different cases. And the police chief and I felt that that would probably work the best. There are some changes as well in the way the penalties are phrased. And one of the big changes is that, for example, if a cab company were operating without a license, that would become an organizational fine instead of an individual fine, and those are 10 times the amount of an individual fine. So that's a change throughout. At the current time, we haven't had that instance or anything that would have kicked into the organizational fine, but that's a protective device. And the other thing that's a little bit strange here is on page 4, where it talks about the charges for the cabs. There had been a suggested change, and before I first started working on this, and when I talked to Teresa in the code office, it turned out that the proposed change would have been less revenue for the city than the way it was. So we put it back to the language that it had previously, and that's taxi cab business license fee is $50 per vehicle used by the cab company, instead of a $50 license fee plus $10 a cab, and we would actually have gotten fewer revenues than we currently do. It would have been less expensive to run a company. Paul?
Okay, so I'm reading, this is section 110802.
Correct.
The bullet says taxi cab business $50 renewed annually. Next one says each cab $10.
No, that should be crossed out.
Which should be crossed out here. I thought I had the latest draft.
Well, you should.
Okay.
And Amy's showing me the same thing. So those changes may not have come through on the last copy. There's only one bullet now.
And that
It
says,
should have been all green on your copy.
The only
It
thing-
says,
okay.
taxi cab business license fee, $50 per vehicle used by the business at any point during the course of the calendar year, renewed annually. And now that's the only bullet.
okay, so each cab's gone, each, okay.
Right.
Okay, I'm sure I got the latest draft.
Well, I thought you did too, but when
I
I
have the one that I
talked,
printed, that you just.
310.
Right.
Printed out, yeah.
Well,
Okay.
I'll send it again, so
Okay.
you'll have, and it could be on page 10,
Yeah.
is the green language.
That's all
Mine's
crossed
in
out
white.
there.
It is
C and D,
crossed
B and
out,
C,
okay.
Crossed out.
Well, I don't know why some of the corrections went and some of them didn't, but Mike Miller said the same thing. He had some problems with a correction not coming through in the law office. But those are basically, the work that we've done. All of this last edition was done with the police chief and the law director. It was just some language situations that we were hammering through. Other comments from council?
Looks good, a
Anything
lot of work.
else? Yeah, I will be so happy to see it moved on. Alice, would you like to
I'd just like to make a couple comments.
come up to the microphone, introduce yourself, and and I have sent a copy, hopefully, the most current version to Alice and to John Rinaldi of the other cab company.
Yeah, let me say thank you, because Paul sent me a copy in January, and you sent me a copy, so thanks
Okay.
for at least keeping me in the loop. I know it's difficult, but
And I will send it again tomorrow, so we're sure everybody's got the right version and the right spellings, too.
Might I make a comment that we are, as a taxi company, we have always been smoke-free. I don't know if anybody knows that, but one of the key things I heard that tonight, oh yeah, but people don't know it, but it's a direct reward that we get where our drivers aren't distracted and it's safe in there. Okay, just to run through this very quickly, and if you could maybe answer a couple things. When you were saying the $50 per cab, that's what we pay now.
Right.
But I didn't, where do you charge the driver? I didn't see that in there.
It now is under the portion that talks about how the driver gets their license, and I moved that on the recommendation of the law director because he didn't want it to appear that you pay that fee, but rather the driver does. When they go for their license, they pay a $10 fee. So it's
$10 now?
Right.
Okay.
It's on page 7, yes, 708B, and if you've got the latest copy, it says
Okay.
the required fee of $10.
In green.
Right, in
Okay,
green.
it's there. Okay, great. Okay, just a couple of notes. You answered the one per vehicle because I had that. Could you explain to me, it seems contradictory, I don't mind a limousine service being treated as a taxi cab as any vehicle could be treated as a taxi cab. But in the business of taxis and limos, there's a difference in insurance, because limousines aren't hailed.
Right,
They're by appointment, so therefore that insurance is cheaper.
right.
So if that is the case, if a limo has to be treated up in page 4 as a taxi cab, it includes limousine services, then why, when we come down and it does not have to have the same markings and et cetera as a taxi cab? I know you don't have to now.
Now, the
way it's set up.
discussion that I had with the police chief on this issue and the law director was that it would only be when that limousine is being used as a cab and has the markings and is used as part of the fleet. That was the distinction, that it's not a limousine service as such where you hire the limousine to do a party or whatever, that's a chauffeur situation. It is not a taxi. But it's saying, and you and I had this conversation about, could a truck be a cab?
Right.
And yes, according to this language, a
Right.
vehicle is a vehicle. If you put the thing on the side of it and you pick
Okay,
up
so
people,
then when
they
those
hail
vehicles
you.
are being used in as a taxi cab, then they have to have the lettering,
That is
everything that a
correct.
taxi cab would have to have.
That is correct.
Gotcha, okay. The other thing on page 5, as far as the insurance, the standard in the insurance business is 50 and 100,000. And I don't know how you came up with 150.
Well, that
but-
came from Wayne T. I can double check on that.
Well, you probably know that from your personal insurance. It's a 50, 100, and then 100 and 300. I mean, it's pretty much the same. That was a question because I did check. For $3 and $4 fares, it comes out to an extra like $800 and some dollars a year for me, about $850. But we don't have any claims, so our insurance is reasonable, and I told you before, we don't hire drivers. I don't, that have points either. So
Right.
for us, I hate to be penalized. To me, that's being penalized for a good record, to me. And then also, when I checked with the insurance company, they said that's not standard in the industry for the commercial insurance. And of course, then that also
On the
shows up
next page,
on the next,
right.
right, with the bonding. And this is a complaint down at the bottom from the taxi cab stands and call stations that a couple of the drivers have said to me, if limos are allowed to park as taxi cabs, they take up 2 to 3 spaces.
Right.
So-
And are they doing that?
Oh,
Has
yeah.
that been a problem?
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't been out to drive lately, but I'm hearing that. I can't imagine anybody wanting a limo for a taxi cab, just to maneuver it in the gas. Okay, then, on page 7, I think I understand the intent of this, all taxi cab drivers to be licensed, but why the exception for automotive technicians? Why
Just
specifically
meaning that
them?
if somebody works on one of your vehicles, they can drive it to test it, that they don't then have to have a taxi cab operator's license?
Well, I think if what I'm reading here, that you want all taxi cabs when they're being operated to have a valid,
Exactly.
Right.
So I see what you're saying. You're saying, does that mean if you're a mechanic, you could drive it without a license?
well, they're not operating
No.
as a taxi cab.
Right,
And I also have
exactly.
people take mine to get oil changes, things like that, that they're not licensed taxi drivers.
Right.
That was, so I see what you're saying there, but at the same time, I didn't even think it would be necessary. I do like the appeal and review, and I assume that that would be on page 8, down at the bottom, that we could go to the board that you're creating? Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there, at one time I mentioned about having someone, it could be like from John's organization or mine, that maybe could somehow be involved in that board, just to kind of know what's going on? It may not have a voting power, or however you set it up, I don't know, but just to somehow
Now,
be.
this board will not meet
I know.
unless there's a question, and
Well-
probably one of you will be involved when there is a question. So,
Well, aren't you going to set up some, won't the board have to be set up? Like you said, you were leaving some issues to the board as far as.
right, the board is set up. It's the safety service director, the code office, and the police chief.
Well, if they, let's just say hypothetically, they were discussing fares, then maybe both of us as cab companies, not just for grievance purposes, but just like maybe we
Right.
could come to some consensus and discussion about fares.
And they will do
hypothetically.
that.
Oh, they will?
All right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They have in the past, but I mean, I don't know.
Exactly,
Well,
and-
I don't
yeah.
know how things are going now.
Well, they felt that part of it was not broken.
Right, well, I mean, it hasn't been so far. And, yeah, I see, now Teresa has handled this in the past, on page 8 at the top, where you discuss the felonies, all that stuff, but there's no mention of points on license, although that has been kind of an unwritten rule through the
Right.
code office, so maybe at some point that should be put in somewhere, board or here, I don't know. I think they allow so many points that they have in the past. It hasn't affected me, like I said. But, otherwise, looks good. I was impressed. On page 11, two things. Open containers, we don't allow that, but I understand now, instead of the person who has the open container being responsible, now it is also going to be the responsibility of the driver?
No,
No?
no. Where is that?
Page 11.
Yeah.
11,
Oh, I'm on page
yeah,
10. That would be why I
16.
can't find it.
Because quite truthfully, we'll get somebody in the rear and we don't know they have an open container
Exactly.
until we expose them. But then also there have been, I have heard it, not with us, but there has been a group of like 4 or 5 that had beer in the back end of a van drinking, and they got cited and actually went to court for it. But when I read this, I thought, okay, now we're being, because it says the suspension of the taxi cab operator driver's license and the taxi cab business license for an open container.
If it were proven that the cab driver were responsible for that, I think that's the, because we had that discussion, that it isn't, if somebody is riding in your cab and they lean back and open a can of beer,
They're out.
and then you're yes,
we
exactly,
wouldn't-
and that's what I'm hearing from the cab drivers, it's pull up to the curb, get out.
Right.
But in the event that right when that happens, a policeman comes up behind them and stops them and da-da-da-da, is the cab driver responsible? And the answer was no,
Okay, that's good.
unless it can be proven that they're, drinking with them.
Oh, yeah, no,
whatever.
God. Okay, all right, that was what I wasn't clear about. And then.
And I will ask the law office to look at these places you've mentioned again and see if he thinks there should be any further change.
Okay. And this is probably ignorance on my part, but what is an organizational offense?
It's in our code, and that's why it cites 10204 and 10205 of our code defines the organizational code. Then if you go to the state law, it explains that what it is that the fines are tenfold from an individual fine. So if it's that the cab company is found liable for something, they're charged 10 times the amount of what an individual would be.
Has that ever happened in
No,
Athens?
it is not. It's a protective.
Right. I mean, I'm just
level.
asking.
No, it
I
has
wasn't-
not.
Okay, good.
At
Otherwise,
least not recently.
This looks good. I mean, it kind of clarifies what my thoughts were before, of being unclear on who's responsible for what and when, so.
Okay,
Looks good to me.
good.
Thank you. Oh, I forgot to give you my name.
Oh,
You
it's a
still
little
need
late.
it?
This is Alice.
Alice Kennedy.
Alice Kennedy from Tabs Taxi. It's alliterative. I should be able to get that. The other little detail about this is that I will not be here for the meeting next week, and so Amy will introduce it, and as I said, I'll try to get a
Clean copy.
clean copy to you all.
Okay, this is a very small thing, but the fee for the driver to register as a taxi driver is $10. I mean, I'm just going to raise this. That doesn't seem like very much to me.
They also have some other things that they have to pay for their background check and things, so the cost is more than the $10.
Okay.
So, anything else on the case? Back to you for parking tickets.
Thank you very much. I put this on the agenda, or on the committee agenda, the parking tickets, more specifically duplicate parking tickets, because there was, as council know, we received an email about a concern on getting duplicate tickets in the empty garage. And then also, I've had some friends and other people mention to me, well, we get duplicate tickets on the street too, every couple of hours, I'll get 2 and 3 tickets sometimes. So I wanted to bring this up after I talked to the mayor for a little bit today, and also Captain Pyle kind of just got some more information on why the city does ticket when you ticket you more than once when you violate the meter. And while it is written into the code that you can receive a ticket every hour after your initial violation, usually it averages about 2.5 hours, Captain Pyle says, as far as getting those duplicate tickets. So there's some flexibility there. But the concern was that they were getting duplicate tickets in the garage, in an empty garage, and the concern was, well, is the city just trying to bring in more money? When in all actuality, what it is it's a deterrence issue and keeping people from just taking their car into the garage and leaving it, for however long, and only receiving a $5 ticket, which is what the first ticket is. So he explained to me, the example would be if you would go into the garage and park your car for 10 hours, then it would be about $6.75 to feed the meter, whereas if you just went and left and didn't pay it at all, it would only be $5. That's just with one citation. So it obviously would make sense to do multiple citations, and that it would be a deterrence issue from future violations in the same way as with meters on the street. It's the same deal. You can park your car and leave it for 6 hours and only get that $5 ticket where the city is losing revenue on those meters. So I just wanted to bring that up and just put that out there as to why the city does do what it does and why the code is written the way that it is. Yes.
Okay, while we're on parking, actually, this is not related to this one, but we discussed it once before, parking on the street and the laws requiring residents to move their cars. And a couple of residents, I don't know what happened to that. I know we discussed it, but I'm not sure.
We'll get back to it.
It's still ongoing.
Okay, looming out there.
Oh, good, because residents who actually, own their homes and
Right.
are being ticketed for parking in front, it is a bothersome issue. But we will return to it.
We will return
Good.
to it.
Okay.
And, we can't distinguish between whether you own the house or you just live there.
Well, I know we've said in some cities, residents get a special tag.
But that would include a rental resident. But anyway,
Well,
that's for another day.
Or would it? But we'll discuss it
Oh, no,
another time.
it's still being
Yeah.
discussed, and it's still certainly
Right.
something that's in the forefront of the Transportation Committee concerns.
Okay, great.
And certainly one of mine, considering that I've gotten a lot of heat for the parking
Right.
now that I'm the chair of the committee.
Okay.
So no, we'll certainly be bringing up the parking hang tags.
Okay.
We're just trying to put some more things together before we do bring it forward, just so we
Okay.
have complete research and
Great.
input
I just
from
didn't
all.
know where
Yeah, no, it
it
hasn't
was.
hasn't died down at all.
Excellent, okay.
It's still going. But yeah, I just wanted to bring up the issue, and I didn't know if the mayor had anything additional to say as far as why the duplicate tickets do occur, but it's fair and it's very logical, and that was the question. Is this fair and logical to do duplicate tickets? And the answer is yes. It's a deterrence issue, so I just wanted to bring that up. So,
Plus, our parking tickets are pretty much a bargain
yeah,
compared to
and
most municipalities.
as Captain Pyle also said, you could easily get 3 and 4 tickets sometimes sitting in the garage that long. And, they're pretty flexible if you would go in and talk to them. They might void a ticket or two, but they're pretty flexible with it. Right, yeah. They're flexible with it, so, I mean, it's very fair. So, next is unless anybody had anything else to say about parking tickets, duplicate parking tickets? No. All right, the transportation grant.
Yet another ordinance for Amy to introduce on Monday night, and ironically, where I will be is at a transportation conference in East Lansing, Michigan, a community that has gone to a combined city-university transportation plan that's been in operation just over a year, and so I'm very excited to be doing that, and I will be going with the transportation person from OU, Sherry Barnes, and so we can hear with double ears and be sure that we're covering, all of the different things that are offered there. It's like 5 different workshops. But it is time for the transportation grant application. This is just an ordinance to for the mayor to enter into the grant application process for transportation. And just kind of to give you a general idea of how this works, the total grants are close to $400,000, and the city's share of that is around $100,000, and then we get back our contracts, our fare box, and advertising that's on the side of the bus. So when it comes down to the actual cash that the city of Athens is paying out for transportation, I still maintain it's one of the best bargains we have going. A bus system does not cover its costs, but we do pretty well with ours, and so this is just the opportunity to apply for those federal and state grants. The cap budgets, in other words, when we buy buses, the federal pays 80%, the state pays 10%, and we pay 10%. The mix is a little bit different in the operational grants, but still, as I said, our actual cash output is not sizable. Any questions or comments? And in case you've been keeping track, and now that we've been working on the possible system between OU and Athens for almost a year and a half, but we have had a second visit from a consultant. He is coming back in May, and he's presented us with some alternate route possibilities and talked about that at length and how what the university might cover and what we might cover, and hopefully in May we're down to dollars and cents, and can it work?
Next item on the Transportation Committee agenda is the annual street tour, and after some correspondence with Ron Lucas, I made copies of the email that he sent to me earlier today. This isn't a finalized plan. He hopes to know more by the end of the week, as he indicated at the end of the email, but these are some of the things he knows we will be looking at. He met with the mayor today, and he's going to continue to get the final approval on the plan, and I also wanted to remind you that it's still set for April 8th at 7 a.m., and Hey, I had to go on it this last year, and it was a 7, and I'm making it a 7 again this year.
It was
Never.
9.
Yes,
I'm
it was.
almost sure
No,
it
it
felt like
wasn't.
7 to you.
We've never seen 7 o'clock.
Yes, it was Saturday morning at 7
It
a.m.
was early, but I don't remember.
I'm looking it up.
Well, I'm
was
100% sure it was
It
7
was
a.m. 8,
Oh, you're
at
so
least
wrong.
fine 8. Another hour, seriously.
The 8th at 8.
The 8th
The
at 8.
8th at 8.
I don't care, whatever time you want. 8?
Can I make it 7?
You just want to
No.
like torture us.
You can be there at 7.
I tell you what.
She didn't wake up for the first 2 hours. I remember.
Why do you
Well,
want
it's
it
true,
at
I did
7?
doze off a few times. It was very educational, and I appreciated it.
Amy, you hadn't been to bed yet.
It's true. But so here are some of what we'll be looking at, and he'll be getting the final approval probably by this Friday, maybe not. That April 8th date should stand though, unless something were to happen and the plan doesn't get approved. April 8th at 8 a.m.
Yeah, what did Ron say about 7?
I don't know if we didn't discuss the time.
Why?
I had said 7 because I could have swore it was 7 last year. I could have swore it was early.
And you didn't like it, so why do it
No, I
again?
did like it. I really enjoyed it. Through
she
no fault of my
means the
own.
7 o'clock.
They're all
You
through
didn't
no fault of my
like
own. Had dozed off.
A couple things on this. This is not the total list, I assume we're going to have
No,
other
this
ones?
is what he knows
Okay.
right now.
And one component we might want to put in here is some sidewalk
The sidewalks,
issues
right.
too. Okay.
And that's
Whether-
something that we had discussed. So.
Okay. That's what I wanted to know.
Sure. And that's all that I wanted to say about the street tour, unless the mayor had anything additional to say, or,
Not on the street tour, I haven't had.
I know you have a
issue, too.
miscellaneous. Okay, miscellaneous.
Okay,
Mayor?
it's time to start the High Street Middle School project, because we would like to be able, obviously, to start construction on that no later than about the 10th of June, when the university graduates. I think a week before that, the middle school lets out. Maybe we could do some mobilization in that time period. But I've got a copy of the plans. Start around.
Are these multiple copies, just one copy?
That's
Okay.
just one copy. They only give me one copy, Paul.
Okay.
We have, since the project started, there's two things on here. One is that we have identified areas of sidewalk that needs to be replaced. We've included that cost within the construction costs because we want to do it through the contractor, but we are preparing individual bills for property owners who own the properties that the sidewalk is being done. And our plan is to call a meeting once it's been bid and we know what the firm prices are with those owners, and invite them to come and discuss if they win. Otherwise, we'll send them a notification of it. We're also have our bidding with an alternate a little bit on this one for some work on West Washington Street that wasn't included in the original, but we do think there's some curb work there to need to do. The architect estimated, or the engineer estimated, about $35,000 to $37,000 on that. But as long as we're in the area, we think we should probably finish it up and do it properly. Also in that set of or plans, or in our plans, there is, as you know, effective July 1st, we're going to have probably a second issue to the grant on West Union Street. We are thinking of building that as an alternate at the same time to be awarded after the 1st of July. We still didn't have time to, do the legislation on that, but we may actually bid it that way, because if we include all the construction items there, we'll need about another $127,000 on this project. And then what that's allowing for is $275,000 construction cost, and then a 10% contingency of $27,500, and 10% for any construction, engineering, or inspection work that's being done. Our hope, of course, is that it will come in under bid. Totally, we would have then put in that $127,000 plus $45,000 we did in design engineering, and the issue 2 pays $203,000. So it's still, we're paying less than 50% of the project, and that's if all the contingencies go bad and everything else. But to give you a little update on the Street Rebuild Fund, we started the year after encumbrances with $703,000 in that, And that included some amount of money from FEMA for a slip on Sunset, the middle slip. But so far, you've approved $161,000 on the State Route 682-56 Union Street interchange and $300,000 on Sunset Slip, so that's $461,000. If we do this 127 and probably the Union Street and also do the bike path engineering, because for that we will wind up out of the street rehab spending $866,000 this year, which of course is more than the beginning balance, but it is one that we're being collected. We about long about the end of April will balance. Those are all of the projects that we have on the books, this year for that. But it also points out that there is not very much money there for an overall paving projects within the city or sidewalks, etc. Because in looking at the January report, the estimated revenue was still less than expenditures budgeted in the street department, with a carry forward of $240-some thousand. And I think, if my math is right, and the revenue does come in at that, which I think is a little bit low, we only have $1,500 in the street fund for play money, which isn't anything. So even though we're going to do the street tour and everything, what's in the budget right now for equipment and capital projects, I think, is $291,000. And just be aware that there's also vehicles there that Ron is preparing a report that are, if you want to see a 1989 truck that's still in service and needs replaced on your street tour, you'll get the opportunity to see one. Just remember that there's a little bit of rust on it and some holes. But we'll try to prepare a total package for you. But I think that because all of these issue 2 funds and the small cities fund that we have, everything but the Sunset was a match, and of course we had already provided some match previously for doing the engineering on Pomeroy Road and the engineering on Union 682. We're probably actually going to do about $3 million worth of projects this year and spend about $860,000 of our own money. So it's not too bad of a ratio. We're getting a lot done this year. That'll wrap it up, I guess. Questions?
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
And then I should pass the plans along instead of being hoarding the plans. Sorry. Since we're doing sidewalks, has the Disabilities Commission had a chance to look at the plans and make sure that the ramps work for them? Because I know that they had some concerns about where the new bank is going in and whether sidewalks and ramps were wide enough.
I don't believe that those were submitted to them for it, but using ODOT money, they have to be ADA compliant.
Okay.
And so it was written, they're usually, I think, 5-foot sidewalks in this case, where the problem, I think, on Stimson, and you got it in 2 places, is there's walls. And then now the new bank has created more walls. I don't think they got a 5-foot sidewalk
I
there.
don't think so either. So there is a Disabilities Commission meeting on Wednesday, if you want me to take that along.
Sure.
And let them look at it.
That'd be fine.
There was a question in there about when school starts back in the fall and whether the project would be done, noted on the side, and I wondered if you found out.
Well, our thinking was that they would not need any more than 8 weeks, and so we were hopeful that it would be done. But until it gets bid and we have that contractor meeting, I can't say for sure, but we're going to put a penalty clause in there from the standpoint of saying it must be done by such and such a date or there's a penalty. But usually with most penalty clauses, if you have rain dates and some certain other events that the contractor can't can't control, acts of God, I guess, then that usually gets extended. But we would want it to, we would hope it would end about a week before school would start, because you have teacher days and everything else. And what our plan really is to get out of that area. That's the first, where the buses come, those are the first 2 blocks that we're going to do. We'll be down on the South High, on the other side, on North High, or up on Lancaster. We won't be around the school itself.
And then my last question is, there are sections of sidewalk that are included in the plans and sections that are not.
Right.
And I know when we went on the street tour, some people are fond of the brick sidewalks and other people think they're uneven, and I just wasn't sure which sections are which and whether brick sidewalks are remaining, or, you know.
I would have to look at the plan. There's only one section that I know of brick sidewalk on High Street, and that's right across from where it joins into State Street. And I just have to look at the plans, which somebody has up there, to tell me whether that's a replacement area or not.
Okay.
In terms of getting reimbursed for the sidewalks, do you have a price for how much that is? I mean, we're going to get money back for that, right?
Well, yeah, but that's what Ron is developing for me now. He's getting the square footage for all of those that are billable. And we will have that before we actually go to have an ordinance on the table. I'll be able to tell you next week, hopefully, how much that is. But that'll be our engineer's estimate, because until it gets bid, we don't really know the contract price. And
Okay, well, I guess the question I have is that we front the money and we get it back from the property owners, is that how it works? Or-
That's what our plan is. I mean, I think that we should probably pay the contractor directly, since we're supervising and controlling the project, but the contractor will have to give us the unit price. We will then use that to bill the property owner.
Okay.
We pay the curbs, and we pay the turning, the ADA ramps on corners, and there's certain areas that we pay for. But directly in front of the home or rental unit, they would. And we'll have to make a couple decisions on probably on some of the school property that needs some sidewalks. But the curbs are in worse shape probably than the sidewalks around the school.
Okay.
Yes, Jim?
Entirely different subject. I know we've talked about this in the past, maybe not the recent past, but the project that the state is mobilizing for on 33 Bridge over East State Street.
They're there.
They're there. They're doing stuff today. What's the, people are asking me.
It's my understanding it was some repairs to the bridge. It said the decking of the bridge and a overlay of asphalt on it. They have not. I don't have a timeline on that. I'll try to get that by the next meeting as to when they plan to be done.
Actually, see, that was my recollection, that there was replacing the pavement, but it just looked as though they were setting up for something more major than that.
Well, they were diverting traffic off of from the entry ramp there so that they could, have a lane to work at a time.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions about the? So then the plan will be to bring the issue to 127,000 middle school product up for first reading next week? People are comfortable with that? Okay. And any other miscellaneous?
I'm kind of disappointed we can't put more money into sidewalks. It sounds like we're pretty much tapped out. I actually got stopped by Ed Baum saying, what sidewalk are we going to do this year? Being that he was in transportation before. So that's the question I have to put to us sometime. The other one is, I think I got a recommendation from one neighborhood association about the street sweeper running full-time at next spring break, which is coming up real soon. Is that the intent? Is it up and running?
Yes.
Okay, that's what they want to know, that's all.
That's what my instructions were till last week.
Okay.
You're getting all those streets that they can't get to normally.
Okay. I think the people who are talking to me are on Hanlon and Brown, so if you can take a sweep through there, they'll be happy campers.
I don't think Hanlon has hardly any parking on it, does it?
It has parking on one side.
It doesn't on the hill, but it does on backwards, I guess. Okay.
I don't know if they go down that often. I don't know. I just know that I'm getting feedback.
But shoot us an email anyway.
Okay.
You'll do your duty that way. And I'll make sure we get it forward.
Okay.
Any other miscellaneous? Okay, Transportation Committee is adjourned.
Okay, Communication Committee, I'll just report on the conversation that we had tonight on safety issues. And we had about 11 people there, not a large group, but we did cover some issues that probably have been covered before, but I will repeat them. Police and fire staffing, and John Schmeeding was able to report on the police community dialogue, which he said was really useful, and that there was a good exchange of information and good kind of communication between the students and the police. Other issues that were raised, I'm going to call it the Richland pseudo sidewalk or crosswalk. There was a lot of discussion about, who had the right of way and how to inform people of whether students should be crossing or cars should be stopping. Wellhead protection, water protection as a water safety issue. Bike rider safety and some awareness that we need to share the road with bikers. Some controversy over the value of streetlights. Many people, or at least some students, had raised the issue last time about streetlights being out and some places being rather dark, or some places needing streetlights, and then we heard the other side that some homeowners don't like them. However, we have to say, you want comfort or safety or some combination of both, but that was an issue. Slippery or broken sidewalks, slippery bricks, and let's see, and I guess we're kind of tight on this budget, I can see, but maybe, painting and, some more visibility for the ramps and other kind of indentations or dangerous walking points. Yes?
Virginia, probably about 5-6 years ago, they painted a lot of those ramps at one
Yeah.
time on Court Street.
Yeah.
They're even more slippery. I seem to recall them
Well,
paint.
it's the side, so you can tell where it is.
They stop and start? Okay.
Okay, where they stop and start. And then, of course, we all got a letter from a person who was handicapped, and I think that's what you were referring to, Debbie, that, that sidewalks and curbs are particularly difficult for people who have any kind of mobility issue. So, anyway, it was an interesting discussion, and, one of the things that we talked about informally was, how to move forward from some of these things, that the conversations bring up the issues and create opportunities for citizens and council people to speak, and then we might, revisit some of these issues and talk about, how are we going to kind of make sure that some things get done as a result of some of these conversations. Am I accurately saying that? Okay, thank you.
So that's it?
We stand adjourned.